7.04 had a ton of changes go straight to live, and this means that everything is changed in the meta. So we're going to talk about the best and worst agents in 7.04 and the characters that you should be playing or avoiding in your ranked games. Now, while it's really hard to make a tier list that will apply to everyone, I'm going to make special caveats within the tiers about characters that are better or worse at different ranks, or characters that have a huge departure in pick rate and ranked versus their pro pick rate, which is often where metas come from. Now, we only have one agent in the D tier, and it's the character that saw no play in Valorant Champions, didn't get any buffs, and is rather weak in ranked play as well, and it's Deadlock. This character is just flat out underpowered. She has some powerful abilities, but overall, there's characters that just do her job better. There's many other characters you would rather pick instead of her, and I do think that she's super inconsistent in the value that you'll get because there's way too many scenarios where her abilities just don't get consistent value. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't pop off with this character. I do think that if you become someone really, really great at Deadlock, you can just have crazy impact over a game if you really understand the limits of your abilities and when to use them. I do think on average, though, this character is going to be a really, really hard character to get value on for the average person, and it's not a character that we suggest picking up right now, although those of you who practice this character now might get some super benefit when this character gets giga buff down the line. All in all, though, only D tier character is definitely Deadlock. Now we got to move on to the C tier, and the first two characters we got to talk about is both Reyna and Phoenix. But before we do, check out SkillCapped.com so you can break out of elo hell and climb higher than you ever have before this act. We got movement guides, advanced tips and tricks, and anything that you could possibly need to climb the ranks as quickly as possible. So what are you waiting for? Check it out right now in the links down below. Now back to the Phoenix and Reyna, and both these characters are here for different reasons, but there are caveats for both of them. Reyna is a character that just doesn't see very much pro play, and as the game gets more coordinated, people are using their utility better, and overall people are playing the game properly. Reyna gets weaker and weaker because the mechanical impact that you can get on a character like this becomes less and less when ability power rises and coordination rises. That doesn't mean that Reynas can't take over a lobby, and that doesn't mean that you can't climb all the way to Radiant one-tricking Reyna, because you can, but you're relying primarily on your mechanical skill while simultaneously taking a lot of the strategy and the understanding that you would learn on other characters out of the game. I also do think that Reyna has an extra amount of pick rate purely because she's the most smurfed on character out of anything else, and I do think that she actually is legitimately powerful and ranked and does have a place occasionally in some coordinated or high rank / pro play, but she is rather niche. But keep in mind, C tier is really not that bad. It's just a niche pick overall. Now, Phoenix is a different story because Phoenix is also a character that doesn't see any coordinated or pro play, but this character is insane for ranked. If this was a purely ranked tier list, which we will do at some point in the next couple of weeks, Phoenix would be an S tier character because Phoenix has a very high win rate at every single rank, even Radiant. And this is from Riot themselves. So you know that Phoenix is just a really solid character for ranked. And Phoenix is a character that can fill the gaps in your team, clearing a corner, taking space on site with your wall, trying to take duels with your flash, or gathering info / getting picks with your ultimate. Not to mention you can farm ultimates a lot in ranked play. You can get a ton of value as a solo carry character, filling in the gaps and the lacking teammates that you have in ranked, simultaneously hard carrying and just popping off over and over again. Plus, because of his ultimate getting up so fast, I think that you can get a lot of momentum with this character in ranked, where you're chaining ultimates and pop-off plays together one after the other. But for a coordinated game or like a pro game, you don't need someone to fill in the gaps of anyone. Everyone is a cog in a machine, right? So even though Phoenix isn't seeing a lot of play in pro play, and the objective meta has Phoenix kind of lacking, for ranked play, Phoenix is very, very solid and a character I would suggest picking up. Next up, I do got to talk about Neon, and honestly, I almost put Neon in D tier, not because the character is bad, but you got to understand where Neon was played on. And in pro play and even in ranked play, there were really only two maps that you saw consistent Neon play on, and that was Pearl and Fracture. Both maps are getting rotated out of the map pool. So you take a character that has really only played on two maps, her best maps, and yeah, you just get rid of them. Yeah, the character is going to be rather weak, but we all know that Neon has a really high amount of skill expression. If you learn her movement techs, get comfortable with her mobility, and most importantly, duo with an initiator that can help set you up, I think you can play her on a number of different maps and still get a lot of value on her. And you get extra bonus points because she's a character that fights on a different axis than a lot of other characters, so most people are not going to get used to playing against really good good neons, and that can give you some free rounds and some free games overall. Next up, we have Yoru, a character that is also not really seeing a lot of play in pro play, but he's a really dominant ranked stomper at the high ranks of play. And you got to understand that if you want to be a Yoru main, you are statistically less likely to win in the multitude of ranks that you're climbing in, and Yoru's win rate directly goes up as you climb higher and higher. So in like everything underneath the diamond rank, Yoru has a negative win rate, but once you get past that, you start to get higher and higher, and Yoru has some of the highest win rates in Radiant, which just shows you that if you get really good at this character, you can just deadlift a game. But it really requires you to have good aim, good understanding of the game, really know your limits on this character. So it's a character that if you put in the work and get really good with, you can just deadlift any game you're in, but it's going to be pretty hard to do so. So keep that in mind if you want some easier games and an easier journey overall in Valorant. Perhaps Yoru isn't for you, but if you're an absolute mad lad, then you might just want to pick him up. Last but certainly not least, in the C tier, we have Sage, a character that is unfortunately just not seeing a lot of play right now, and it doesn't look like the rotations will make her any better. Really, the one map that she wants back in the map pool is Icebox, which just isn't coming back into the map pool, unfortunately. If it was, she would probably be a high B tier pick, because at least she would have one map where she legitimately sees maxed out play or a ton of freaking play. But as is, I think that she's a little bit underpowered for some of the other maps. She doesn't really see that much play consistently. I do think that she's a solid pick for ranked play, though. She kind of fits into any team composition just fine, and I don't necessarily think that she's ever a truly bad pick, but there could be better picks on any team. Now moving on to the B tier, characters that see a bit more play are solid picks, and overall I think that these characters have potential in the shifting meta after a lot of the huge nerfs that happened to the top characters in the meta. At the bottom is Cypher, a character that was already seeing some play on certain maps. Unfortunately, Fracture was one of them, and that's getting removed from the map pool. Unfortunate, and I don't necessarily think he's going to be amazing on Breeze or anything like that, but who knows, this new map might favor Cypher. It's unclear at this point, and honestly, I do think that Cypher is actually pretty strong. He's really just being kept down really hard right now by Killjoy, which is not going anywhere, but I do think that Cypher will see play here and there, and for ranked, you get extra value with this character. Actually, the lower in rank you go, the less discipline your opponents have, the better and better your trips become, and I think he's actually a solid pick, so I'm putting him here. The next up, we have Chamber, and Chamber's still not completely dominant or anything like that, but he is quite a bit better than he was pre-patch for two main reasons. Number one, this character has been steadily gaining ground and seeing more and more pick rate in both pro and ranked play, and he's a really good pub stomper where if you're really cracked mechanically, you can decimate a lobby just being able to whip out gun the ability all the time. In addition to that, he's kind of taken back being the best opper from Jett. I still think that Jett is probably a little bit of a better opper, but realistically, Chamber is a lot closer than he was before, and if you're trying to abuse the op in ranked, which I think is a good idea, or even abuse the op in pro play, which is also a good idea, Chamber might be your new best bet. And also, Breeze is a fairly good map for him overall, and I do think that he's going to get some extra pick rate points from that as well, coming back into the map pool. In addition to that, Harbor is the next character on our list, which is another character that I think really likes that Breeze is back into the map pool. This is good for Harbor because Harbor really likes Breeze as a double controller in a double controller setup. And overall, I do think that Harbor is kind of struggling to find his place as a solo controller. He's really only ever played in a duo controller setup, but with Breeze coming back in, that is a really big deal for him. And overall, he still saw some play here and there in pro play as well, so I think he's a solid B tier character right now. Now, Gecko did get a little buff to Mosh Pit, but a little bit of a nerf to Wingman, and overall, Gecko is still a character kind of struggling to find his place in a sea of super broken initiators. He's just like another one that is okay at some things, but it just kind of is hard to pick him when everything was so strong. But now that Skye has been nerfed, I think it leaves some more room for some other initiators to flourish, and I think Gecko is one of them. He was already seeing some amount of play before, and I think he's a fair bit better in ranked play than he is in pro play, but still, Gecko is a character that will pick up a couple of percentage points here and there that is being kind of given by Skye, but I don't think he's going to take over the meta or anything like that. Next up in the B tier, we do have Fade, and unfortunately, Fade did get a slight nerf. I mean, it's really tiny, but the time to re-equip the gun takes slightly longer after using her Prowler, and that's not really going to affect that much, but it is something to point out just so that you know. And in addition to that, Fade is getting a little bit of percentage points in one direction because Breeze is coming back, where I think she's pretty decent on Breeze, honestly, even though Sova's a bit better. But I also gotta point out that Pearl is leaving, and that was like her best map, which is gonna hurt her quite a bit. And if it wasn't for that, I do think that she would be one of the better initiators going into this next patch. That being said, still a really solid pick, and I've said said it a lot, the fact because her Prowler clears a lot of these like one and done corners that people really like to play, the lower in rank you are, the better and better Fade becomes, and she's one of the best starter initiators. If you're looking to get into the initiator role, you don't know what to play, Fade's amazing in my personal opinion. Next off, at the top of the B tier, still really solid, and honestly probably deserves bottom of A, but it was a little too stacked. I'm putting Jett. And look, I hear you. Tailwind, super nerfed. Cloudburst, super nerfed. Updraft, super nerfed. Bladestorm, slightly nerfed. I understand all those things. Still doesn't make Jett anything weaker than the top of B tier, and she's probably still an A tier pick. And that just shows you how strong this character was before she was nerfed. She's really unique, unlike anything else, and what she could pull off before was probably just overpowered in the fact that you got to dash onto your smoke onto site, wait for a flash, pop out of your smoke, kill everyone on site, take site for free. It was just too powerful. In addition to that, you got to use all your abilities to get to peak angles for free with an op, and she was the best opper by a mile. So she was the best person to take space, she's the best person to op, and she was the best person on an eco because you just get knives all the time that just helps your economy so much. The character was giga busted before. We all know she was. Maybe she didn't deserve this much, but I still am pretty confident that this character is not unplayable. She's still gonna have a substantial part in the meta. She's still one of the only other duelists besides Raze, which we'll talk about in a bit, that is capable of taking space that aggressively and holding it onto a site. This character is still really solid, and I don't think that everyone should just up and ditch Jett as a Jett main. If you're someone that is confident in Jett and you like playing Jett, she's still going to be very, very strong. She's still going to see play in the meta, and she's also going to be dominant in ranked play as well, so don't fear that much. The next up, we do got to talk about A tier characters, and at the bottom, I'm going to have Breach. Now, Breach would honestly be a bit higher than this if it wasn't for the fact that Fracture was leaving, but Haven is still here, and it looks like the new map actually would play fairly well for Breach in my personal opinion. And in addition to that, I do think that this character is just really good in general, both for duo queue ranked and in the meta at large. Breach is a really solid character that does something very different from the other initiators and is super good, especially combined with characters like Raze and Neon, and I do think that this character is a bit slept on, so I'm gonna put him at the bottom of A tier. Next off we have is Kayo, and Kayo is incredibly solid of a pick, mainly because he's super dominant on Ascent with a lot of the lineups, and in addition to that, he sees quite a bit of play on Breeze. It's one of his better maps, and with that coming back into the map pool and Ascent staying, he's getting huge ups from that alone. And with Skye falling down in pick rate, all of a sudden a lot of these other initiators just make more sense. Not that Skye is just vanishing and going everywhere, but oftentimes what happened before was Skye was so strong that when you decided between Skye and another initiator, the other initiators never won, right? They had to do something really, really specifically strong on a map to see play over Skye, but now the differences in power level is a lot closer. So that means instead of her having a cracked out like 60% pick rate, she might have a 20, 30%, and the rest of those percentages are going to go to several different characters, a lot of them being initiators. Now, speaking of the devil, Skye is right next, and she's in the middle, smack dab of the A tier. And I do understand Skye got a lot of nerfs. Guiding Light got nerfed, Trailblazer got nerfed, Seekers got nerfed. Still, the character was so strong that these almost bring her back in line with other initiators. It doesn't make her unplayable by any stretch of the imagination, and I think that she's still going to be a substantial part of the meta. Still very, very strong. Her heal is still really, really good on eco. Her ultimate, while harder to get and a bit weaker, is still a great source of information. While Trailblazer is easier to deal with less health, it's still really good for getting information, and honestly, it's oftentimes still going to be pretty hard to deal with against one singular person. And Guiding Light still gets information the same way. Sure, it doesn't blind people as much, so it's not going to be able to be used as aggressively, but as a pure initiator and not like this initiator duelist hybrid thing, she's still very, very solid, and I think that she's still very, very good in the meta. Now, next up on the list, we have Brimstone. Brimstone is a character that might not deserve this high of a placement. That remains to be seen. Still a really great character on maps like Bind, but Fracture, his best map, got removed from the map pool. So thinking about it that way, this character could be down at the bottom of A, maybe even high B, but also I do think that this character is just one of the best controllers to play in ranked play on a lot of maps. He's just very consistent. He's very solid. He's really easy to flex to as people that don't main controllers. Brimstone is someone that doesn't require you to know complicated lurk timing and how to balance your abilities with your cooldown regeneration. Like, there's just a lot that you just don't have to deal with on Brim. He's a really solid character that I think is even better in ranked play, and that's kind of why I'm pushing him up here. But as far as where he will truly lie, it's going to depend on how much play he sees on the new map Sunset, that remains to be seen. Now, last up at the top of the A tier, we have Astra. And Astra, unfortunately, did get like a nerf buff. She got nerfed specifically in her gravity well, which was the best ability. Like, that was very, very consistent and very, very strong. And while her Nova Pulse got buffed and her Cosmic Divide got buffed, now her Cosmic Divide doesn't give away any sound on the other side of it. These are legitimate buffs. That gravity well nerf was a big deal, and I think it's gonna kind of be a wash for the character because she got 2 minor buffs for 1 major buff, and while not fantastic, it's probably fine. Now, specifically, Pearl getting rotated out is a hurt to her pick rate because she did see quite a bit of play on Pearl, but I think she'll see substantial pick rate on Breeze as well, just as a double controller in a double controller setup. She wasn't half bad actually duoing with a Viper on that map, although I do think that Harbor is going to see a little bit more play than this. Astra is still legitimately good, and just as a character that people are solving more and becoming better and better with in ranked play. When she first came out, it was a character that was really hard to set up because most people didn't fully understand how to properly synergize with an Astra, but as time goes on and on, people in ranked get better and better at synergizing, and I do think for sure that if you're in a duo queue trying to set things up and combo together, this is a fantastic character to play. I'm putting her at the top of A tier, but where she sticks is definitely going to depend on what controllers are going to see play on Sunset, which at this point, no one knows. Now we're going to move on into the S tier. These are characters that are going to define the meta for the foreseeable future and the best of the best right now. And at the bottom is Sova. Now, Sova did get a pretty substantial nerf with his recon now only pulsing twice instead of 3 times, which does freaking suck, but still, the character is going to be very powerful as an initiator, and his biggest competition, Skye, got a substantial nerf, much bigger than he did, and that is going to increase his pick rate. In addition, Breeze is coming back into the map pool, which is one of Sova's best maps. He plays really well with Viper, and he just plays really well on that map in general, and Sova is just going to be on the up and up, even with his nerf. In fact, if they didn't nerf him, he probably would have just filled the void that Skye left in a lot of cases. So I don't really agree with the nerf, but I understand it. Seems like they're trying to nip power creep in the bud, but some of the characters they left untouched, which we'll talk about why it doesn't make sense in a couple of picks. Now, we do got to talk about Omen that did see a small nerf, mainly because you don't get inertia with your paranoia anymore. So if you're running and then paranoiaing, it's not gonna be as fast as it was before, which definitely sucks a little bit more for some of the fast executes that you were trying to take. Catching people off guard with a really, really fast paranoia into a sight take, that sucks a bit, but it's not gonna fundamentally change his position in the meta. It's not a big enough nerf to shake him up or anything like that. Omen's very unique in what he does, and he's very good at what he does, and that's not gonna change anytime soon. Omen's still one of the best characters in both pro and ranked play, a really, really solid catch-all controller where his only true weakness is the fact that he can't just play on the maps or work really well on the maps that require a line smoker, someone like Viper, to split the site in half. So like maps like Breeze, you need a line smoker like Viper. So that's unfortunate for Omen, but outside of that, he's just a really solid pick, and I think he's actually good in dual controller setups as well. So yeah, Omen is fantastic, and he definitely deserves our S tier. Now, next up, we do gotta talk about Viper. Viper is like the clear winner right now with Breeze coming back in. She's gonna see 100% pick rate on Breeze. She was already seeing a lot of pick rate. That's just kind of obvious that Viper's gonna be amazing. Now, she did see a lot of pick rate on the maps that are leaving, so it's kind of a wash there, but I think she's even better on Breeze than she is on 2 of the maps that are leaving, and Viper's just kind of a house right now. Completely irreplaceable. I understand that Harbor is technically a line smoker, but he cannot solo smoke anything, while Viper could definitely solo smoke, lock it down. She's needed, she's fundamental, she's strong, she's an S tier, baby. The next up at the top of the S tier, we have 2 characters that were already at the top of the S tier, and guess what? Everything else got nerfed, and these characters either slightly got touched or didn't get touched at all, which makes no sense. They're gonna stay right where they are at the top of the meta, dictating the entire thing. And first off, we gotta talk about Killjoy, where Killjoy was just seeing a absolutely ridiculous pick rate, just non-stop pick rate on multitude of maps, really, really dominant in pro and coordinated play, and one of the best characters you could possibly pick in ranked and in low ranked play. So when you have a character that is good on every stage and every rank and every skill level, she's just that freaking good. And yes, they did technically nerf her. They gave her 1 ultimate point more to get locked down, but that's not why she's busted. That's not why this character's so good. It's not just her ultimate. I mean, her ultimate's good, don't get me wrong, but Killjoy would see play with no goddamn ultimate. That's how good this character is right now in the meta. If you put her on a site, it's so much harder for people to push onto that site. Your team can cheat and and stack more people on the other side. It's completely overpowered. It gives you information. It gives you stall. Killjoy is amazing, super strong, and she's priced to get even stronger because everything else got nerfed, and she's still super powerful. In fact, one of the few ways to deal with the Killjoy is to actually have a Jett smoke and dash onto site, and then while Jett is on site and taking space on site, like a follow with the flash, the rest of the team is dealing with Killjoy utility, right? Because the Jett is just dashing past it. Now you can't even really do that as reliably. Yeah, I mean, Killjoy is going to be just freaking nuts. And then the last but certainly not least character, the character at the very top of the S tier, most likely the biggest winner from this patch, and it's Raze. And the thing about Raze is Raze was neck and neck in pick rate with Jett. They were basically yin and yang for a lot of the maps. Maps that Jett was favored on, she played. Maps that Raze was favored on, she played. But Jett got hyper neutered, even though they were about the same pick rate. But Raze got untouched, left completely scot-free. And when that happens, you know that Raze is going to be the clear winner here. She's one of the few characters that can take space on point that aggressively, like they talked about before. With Jett a bit weaker, Raze is gonna fill to pick up some of those pick rates and that play points. Now, keep in mind that Raze can't op, so that's something that is important. But she definitely is still gonna eat up more pick rate when she was already at like 50% pick rate in the pro meta. So yeah, she's just gonna be one of the best characters to play, period. She's gonna make up a lot of compositional strategies in the new meta, and she's a character that I have been consistently suggesting to play and pick up. Very strong, very consistent, and yeah, attacks the meta in a way that no other character can right now. So definitely suggest her. But if you want to quickly master any of these agents with a click of the button, SkillCapped.com has the best agent guides you'll find anywhere, whether you're really trying to learn the basics of these characters to mastering positioning and how to take individual fights in your rank. Check out SkillCapped.com right now in the links down below.